actually was installing one at one point, and I accidentally flipped the switch on with only 4 out of the 5 blades, and it nearly took my head off. So being out of balance is not a good way to be. So in our current life, we have so many things to balance. We need to balance our business life. We need to balance our family life. We need to balance our spiritual life. We need to balance our social life. And we need to balance our financial life. And if any of those things are out of balance, it's like a ceiling fan with less than the full number of blades. And in order to be in this balance, in order to be in balance, I need to be the same person in every aspect of my life. In all the different aspects of my life, I need to be the same person. I can't treat my family in one way and my business partners in another way. I can't act a certain way at PLC, but then socially act a different way. And in order to be the same person, I have to take the time and the energy to be somewhat introspective, to find out who I am. Some people do that through meditation, some people do it through walking or other spiritual practices. But we all have to find out who we are. And we have to do this on a regular basis. It's that spiritual practice. It's something that we do every day of our life. And again, each step takes us to a closer and closer realization of that balance. And one of the things that I realized as I started thinking about this doing this practice on a daily basis is that it's more than just 2 hours on a Sunday in PLC. I'm counting getting ready and driving here and out here. It's more than 2 hours on a Sunday in PLC that we need to practice this. And I did the math. There's 168 hours in every week. Minus the 2 hours at PLC is 166 hours, minus 56 hours for sleeping. Leo, you looking like, am I doing my math right? I need someone to recheck it. I almost thought I'd say the wrong number to see if someone would shout, oh no, it's not 156, it's 166. Anyway. So it leaves about 108 other hours, waking hours. So there was a thought that I was going to call this talk, since it was 108 hours versus 2 hours at PLC, I was going to call this talk 50 times faster to enlightenment. Or then it struck me again, I was thinking, oh, maybe I ought to call it 50 Shades of Enlightenment. That was like a whole nother kind of weird vibe. And there we go. But we need to be practicing, we need to be implementing the things that we learn on Sunday on a daily basis. And what happens, part of the lesson here is that we're all one. We are all divine spirit, which means we need to be inclusive. We need to be inclusive of everybody and everything. We can't be divine. We can't be divine creations. We can't be God and say they're not God. They're not one. We're all one, but they're not. That's not, we can't do that. And we can't ignore even the smallest, we can't discount even the smallest creatures in the universe, because there is a plan, there is a wholeness to this universe. And even though we don't see that wholeness, even though we can't sense what the purpose is of every little thing that exists, every little action that's taken, we have to have faith. We have to have faith that there is a plan. And one of the things that had occurred to me some time back was that, you know those little gnats? They come out at our house in the morning time, the little black gnats or flies. They are the most frustrating. I hate those things. They're the most frustrating things. But at some point over the last couple of years, I thought, you know, I'm not gonna try to smash them. I'm not gonna devise ways to trap them and kill them, and like I've done in the past, because they're a part of that plan too. So even those smallest things are a part of this plan. That everything is inclusive. Everything is part of the universal balance that we are a little piece of. We're like one little tooth in a giant cog in an antique clock that's got all of these pieces. And if one of those pieces are missing, the clock isn't in balance. It doesn't keep the same time. So, being that we're this inclusive, it seemed obvious to me that PLC, Science of Mind, is like a Carnival cruise or like a Caribbean resort. It's all inclusive. Everything's here. As much as you want of anything, you can get here. As much as you can handle, we'll give it to you. You just need to make the choice. You need to make the choice to direct Spirit to provide that abundance to you. You just need to make the choice to explore and to have the courage to do that. Because there is always abundance in the world. And this doesn't mean go out and just buy things and charge stuff and create all this stuff in your life. Because Spirit is not judgmental. Spirit will give you abundance, whatever you ask for. So if you go out and buy stuff with the idea that you're going to create debt, Spirit will provide you abundant debt. You will have abundant debt. If you're making choices in your life that you're going to eat fast food all the time, and that's what you want, and you're just going to consume and consume and consume and consume, Spirit will provide abundance. You'll have an abundant waistline. But if you make the choice, to seek a healthy lifestyle, to purchase things, to acquire things that are part of your spiritual path, that actually bring you closer to Spirit, Spirit will provide those for you as well. Because one of the things that's so important to realize is that we are not, Science of Mind and the philosophy of Science of Mind is not going to make judgments on what's good and what's bad. Spirit does not make that judgment. If you want bad things, unhealthy things in your life, you make the choice and they'll be there. The other thing about this realizing abundance is to kind of relax into the flow of it. It's a very interesting process for me that you can actually relax, have faith that things are flowing in the right way, that divine right action is in place, but that you can also direct stuff. So it's this feeling of relaxing in faith that things will be okay, but also being very active in taking and making the choices that create the life that you want. So I've talked a little bit about awareness. I've talked about inclusion. I've talked about abundance. And now I want to talk about one of the major tenets of Science of Mind, and that is what we focus on, we create in our life. That the law of attraction is always happening. If we are looking for balance in happiness, and we're looking for balance in being able to take on the challenges of the world and still be on an even keel, operate like a well-oiled machine, if we're not getting off of balance, if we're focusing on balance, if we're focusing on those things that bring us closer to Spirit, those are the things that will be provided in our life. So we can relax in the knowledge that this is the truth, and also be very active in taking and directing and calling Spirit to bring those things into our life. And so this takes me back to our trip that Susan and I went to Yosemite. And I don't know what, for some reason, I know what it was. She was driving into Yosemite and I was going to drive out. We were going clear to the valley and I didn't want to drive both ways. So as she was driving in, it was an unusual position for me to be in the passenger seat. And I noticed an area, that had been burned out probably 15 or 20 years ago. And I realized that the universe, in its balancing act, the universe had taken the destruction of that forest fire and a devastated area, which I had thought would never be the same in my entire lifetime, had taken that devastated area and had used the ash and the destruction to actually form new life. That there were plants and trees and birds, and that there was an environment that was being developed, designed, created for all of these elements. And that's the way the universe works in our life. If there are times that we have felt destroyed and devastated, Spirit will build on those. When we make the choices, when we direct Spirit will build on those times when we felt devastated and create new life and new sounds and new music in our life. And we will flourish again from that time of apparent destruction. So finally, I want to close with a story that I heard in Yosemite, that I read in Yosemite, that I think will really just sum this whole talk up. There was a city slicker. This took place years and years and years, decades ago. City slicker from LA who's coming up to Yosemite, and he's going to do some hiking in the backcountry, like probably a lot of us have. And he figures, okay, I need to get some last supplies. I need to get some supplies before I go into the backcountry. And he stops, I think it was at the Wawona store. He stopped at the Wawona store there, the little country store. This was before the gas station was there. I don't know how he got there. Maybe he got there on a horse and buggy. Anyway. He stops in the little store there, and as he's walking in, there's this old timer that's sitting on a bench. And this guy looks like he's been out in the sun, in the elements for 80 years. Rugged old guy. City slicker walks into the store, and the old guy kind of follows him in, gets behind the counter, and the city slicker says, "Is this your store?" Old timer looks at him and says, "Yep." He says, the city slicker says, "Well, I'm up here, I'm going to do some hiking, I'm going back into the backcountry, and I want to know, are there bear in this area?" He said, "So can you tell me, are there bear?" The old timer looks at him and says, "Yeah." "Well, what kind of bear? Do you have black bear up here?" "Yeah." "Well, grizzly bears, I'm worried about the grizzly bears. Do you have grizzly bears up here?" And the old timer, "Yeah." The city slicker was getting pretty worried because he had heard stories about grizzly bears. And so he was thinking a little bit, and he said to the old timer, he says, "Do you have any of those bear bells?" And you know what bear bells are, right? They're little jingly bells, and you put them on your pack and stuff so you don't surprise the bears. So the city slicker says, "Do you have bear bells?" The old timer, "Yeah." "Is that them over there on the back counter?" And the old timer, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So the city slicker goes over and he's picking out bells, and he's ringing all of them, trying to figure out what is the perfect bell. And he picks a couple bells. They're really nice bells. So he goes up to the old timer and he says, "These are the ones I want. You think this will do the job?" "Yeah." He buys them. He's getting ready to walk out, and then he tells the old timer, he says, "Wait a minute." He says, how do I know if it's black bear or grizzly bear in the area?" And the old timer says, "From the scat, from their droppings." And the city slicker says, "Well, what's the difference between black bear scat and grizzly bear scat?" And the old timer says, "Well, the grizzly bear scat's got all the bells in it." So what lesson do we learn from that? Don't buy bells or do buy bells? So what lesson do we learn from that? Do we learn from the old timer to speak wisely and watch your words? Or do we learn the lesson from the city slicker that sometimes, even as prepared as we think we are, things will be a little different? I don't think so, though. I think we learn the lesson from the bear. And that lesson is this: the bear tells us that even when life looks like a big pile of scat, Whatever you put in always comes out at the end. So it is.